What if invisible carolers exposed your family's darkest secret on Christmas Eve? I should have known something was off when Uncle Ray showed up sober. It was Christmas Eve in Duncan, and our house looked like Santa's workshop had exploded. Mom had gone full Madison family Christmas mode. Lights strangling every surface, 3 trees? Yes, 3. And enough food to feed half of Vancouver Island. 20 of us crammed into the living room, all wearing those god-awful matching sweaters Aunt Linda ordered online. Mine had a reindeer with googly eyes that kept falling off. Another eggnog, Claire? Dad thrust a mug at me, his Santa hat crooked on his head. It's my 5th? It's Christmas. That was the Madison family motto, basically. It's Christmas. The excuse for everything. Overeating, over-drinking, over everything. We were those people. The ones who started decorating in October. The ones the neighbours secretly hated. I grabbed the eggnog. My cousin Jessica elbowed me. Phone out. Did you see Trevor posted about his new girlfriend? Jessica, I'm 32. I don't care about Trevor. You cared last summer. That was a moment of weakness. The house buzzed with the usual chaos. Grandma arguing with Aunt Carol about pie crust. The kids screaming over a Nintendo Switch. Uncle Marcus asleep in the recliner, mouth open, catching flies. My brother Jake and his wife Emma in the corner, not talking. Marriage trouble, probably. Normal, loud. Hours. Then the singing started. At first I thought someone had turned on the outdoor speakers. The voices drifted through the walls, muffled but clear. Traditional Christmas carols, harmonized beautifully. Professional level stuff. Oh, good, the carolers. Mom clasped her hands together. I was hoping they'd come by. The what? I'd lived here my whole childhood and never heard of carolers. You don't remember? They come every Christmas Eve. You can't see them, but you hear them. It's a Duncan thing. I stared at her. Invisible carolers. That's a Duncan thing. Has been since the 50s, Dad chimed in. They stop at random houses, sing a few songs, move on. Harmless fun. That's objectively insane. It's tradition. Mom was already heading to the window, pulling back the curtain. Nothing out there but our lawn decorations and the empty street. But the singing continued. Crystal clear. Silent night. Holy night. The kids pressed their faces against the windows, fogging up the glass. Grandma smiled that faraway smile she got when she was remembering the good old days that probably weren't that good. Used to scare the heck out of me when I was young, Uncle Marcus said, suddenly awake. Thought the house was haunted. It's just acoustics, Jake said, always the engineer. Sound carrying weird in the cold air or something. Sure, honey. Emma's voice dripped with sarcasm. Their marriage was definitely in trouble. The carolers moved through 3 songs, standard stuff. Everyone relaxed, went back to their conversations, their drinks. Then the 4th song started. It wasn't any carol I recognized. The melody twisted, went minor, wrong. The words came slowly, each one dropping like a stone into still water. Someone inside has done something wrong. The room went quiet, one by one. Conversations died. Dark stains on their hands. Guilt in their chest. What the heck is this? Jake stood up, face pale. On Christmas Eve, 12 years ago tonight. Mum's mug slipped from her hands. Eggnog splashed across the hardwood. A tragic fate. Then buried the rest. Turn it off, Aunt Carol's voice cracked. It's not ours. Dad was already at the sound system, jabbing buttons. It's coming from outside. The children started crying. My cousin grabbed them, herded them upstairs, but we could still hear it. Everyone could hear it. The carolers know what you tried to hide. We see the truth you keep locked inside. Someone here caused a dark ending. Then silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Silence. 20 people. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 12 years ago. Christmas Eve. What happened 12 years ago? I ran through my memory. I would have been 20, home from college for the holidays. And that was the year. Sarah. I said it without thinking. Sarah, Dad's sister. The one we never talked about. The one whose photos disappeared from the albums. She'd lived in Duncan, just outside town. And she'd vanished on Christmas Eve, 12 years ago. Everyone looked at me, then at each other. That's ridiculous, Dad's voice was too loud. Sarah ran off with some guy. Everyone knows that. Did she though? Uncle Ray spoke for the first time all evening. Because her car stayed here. Her bank account was never touched. She just disappeared. The police investigated, Aunt Linda said quickly. Too quickly. They didn't find anything. They didn't find her, Ray countered. The living room had transformed. Minutes ago. It was Christmas chaos. Now it felt like a pressure cooker. Everyone watching everyone else, trying to remember who was where 12 years ago, who had access, who had motive. This is insane, Jessica laughed, but it sounded hollow. We're seriously believing invisible carolers just accused one of us of causing what happened. They didn't accuse anyone specifically, Emma said slowly. Just someone inside. Super helpful, but the seed was planted. Suspicion, that toxic thing, spreading like spilled wine. I watched my family, really watched them. Dad, gripping his drink too tight. Mum, not meeting anyone's eyes. Uncle Ray, sober for the first time in years, watching everything. Jake and Emma, sitting as far apart as possible. Aunt Carol, whispering urgently to her husband. Grandma, staring into space. Someone here knew something. Sarah and I had a fight. Dad said it quietly. The day she disappeared, about the house, everyone turned. What house? I asked. Our parents' house. After they died, Sarah wanted to sell it. I wanted to keep it. We argued. She said I'd regret it. Then she left. And you never saw her again. Ray finished. No? Convenient? Ray, you were always jealous of her. Ray stood up, pointing. She was Mom's favorite, and you hated it, and that house was worth $500,000. I didn't do anything to my sister. Someone did. The room erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying. I slipped away. Nobody noticed, too busy yelling at each other. Christmas, officially over. The basement was quiet, cold. We used it for storage mostly, old furniture, boxes of decorations, forgotten junk. I didn't know what I was looking for. Just something. Anything that made sense. The far corner had a new concrete patch. Maybe 3 feet square. I'd never noticed it before. But then again, who studies their basement floor? I ran my hand over it, different color than the surrounding concrete. Newer. 12 years ago, Dad had fixed some foundation issues down here. I remembered because he did it himself. Wouldn't let anyone help. Said he wanted to save money. My stomach turned. No way. But I heard footsteps on the stairs. Dad. Claire, what are you doing down here? I stood up too fast, just getting away from the chaos. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw it. Fear. Guilt. Dad, my voice shook. Where's Sarah? I told you. Where is Sarah? His face crumbled. For a second, he looked ancient, broken. It was an accident. The words hung there, impossible to take back. She came by that night, still angry about the house. We fought. She shoved me. I shoved back. She fell, hit her head on the fireplace. Just wrong angle, wrong everything. She was gone before I could call anyone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I panicked. Your mother was upstairs with you kids. If they investigated, if anyone knew we'd fought, I'd lose everything. Prison, my family, so I... He gestured vaguely at the floor. You buried her in our basement. I didn't know what else to do. Call the police. It was an accident. You think they'd believe that? Her brother, standing over her, fighting about money? Claire, I made a choice. A terrible choice. But I made it for this family. Upstairs, I could still hear arguing. Everyone accusing everyone else. 20 people. All turning on each other because of one man's lie. My dad, the guy who dressed as Santa every year. Who made terrible jokes and cried during It's a Wonderful Life. Who'd hidden a tragic secret under our feet for 12 years. Does Mom know? He shook his head. Nobody knows. Just me. And now, me. I looked at the concrete patch. Sarah was down there. Had been down there through every Christmas, every family dinner, every game night. We'd stood on her grave and laughed and lived our lives. What are you going to do? Dad's voice was small. I thought about the carolers. Invisible, impossible carolers who somehow knew. Who'd exposed everything with a few words. Who'd destroyed Christmas and maybe destroyed our family. But they hadn't lied. I looked at my father. This man I'd loved my whole life. Who'd taught me to ride a bike. Who'd scared away my nightmares. Who'd caused his sister's dark ending and lied about it for 12 years. I don't know yet. Upstairs, someone was crying. Probably Mom. The family was fragmenting. Everyone a suspect. Trust shattered. And I was the only one who could fix it. Or finish it. I walked past Dad, headed for the stairs. Claire, I need to think. The carolers were gone, but their damage remained. Maybe that was the point. Not to solve the mystery, but to make sure the guilt stopped being comfortable. To force the truth into the light. I reached the top of the stairs and looked back. Dad stood in the basement, under the single bare bulb, looking more like a ghost than a man. Tomorrow, I'd make a choice. Tonight, I'd sit with 20 people and watch Christmas die. The Madison family tradition over.
What if the prettiest tradition in your town was a hunting ground? I should have known something was off when the police started showing up at our garage, 3 weeks before Christmas. Not for tune-ups, not for oil changes, for questions. My name's Liam Brookfield. I'm 17. I fix cars with my old man, and I've lived in Williams Lake my whole life. This place is the kind of small where everyone knows your business before you do, where winters hit like a hammer, and where the Festival of Lights is the one night we all pretend. Everything's perfect. Except this year, perfect had cracks in it. You hear anything weird out on Dog Creek Road? Constable Morrison asked me, leaning against the bay door while I changed Mr. Peterson's brake pads. Like what? I wiped oil off my hands with a rag that hadn't been cleaned since September. Just anything unusual? I shrugged. Morrison left without buying anything. That happened 4 more times, with different officers. My dad said they were spooked about last year. Last year, on Christmas Eve, the Hendersons vanished. Mom, Dad, 2 teenagers. They'd been at the festival, then gone. Their truck turned up 3 days later, on a logging road, empty, doors open, engine still warm. Police called it a voluntary disappearance, which is cop speak for, we got nothing on them and we're moving on. But people don't just vanish in Williams Lake. Not like that. December 24th came cold and mean. The kind of cold that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe. I met Avery Redstone outside the Scout Island parking lot at 7. She showed up on her dad's quad. Long black hair whipping behind her. Red toque pulled low. You bring the thermos? I asked. She pulled a flask from her jacket. Better. Your dad's rye? He won't miss it. She grinned, sharp, confident. Avery grew up on a ranch north of town. The kind of girl who could pull a calf at dawn, and outdrink you by nightfall. Noah Clark appeared a minute later, camcorder already rolling. Skinny kid, 15, shaggy blonde hair, nervous energy. He'd been in foster care most of his life. Just landed with the Mackenzies last month. I didn't know him well, but Avery vouched for him. "Why are you filming?" I asked. "Documentary," Noah said. "Small-town Christmas traditions for my media class. School's out, man. Extra credit never sleeps." He panned the camera toward the frozen lake, where hundreds of paper lanterns glowed against the snow. The Festival of Lights looked like a postcard. Families clustered around fire pits. Kids skated on the cleared ice. Someone in a Santa suit handed out hot chocolate. But underneath it all, I felt it. The tension. The way parents held their children tighter. The way people kept glancing toward the tree line. "There's like 10 officers here," Avery muttered. "For a Christmas festival?" She was right. Police cruisers lined the road. Officers stood in clusters, radios crackling. "They're expecting something," Noah said quietly. We drifted toward the edge of the crowd, away from the noise. That's when I saw it. A single lantern, floating across the far side of the lake. Not near the festival, not near anyone, just drifting. "That's not part of the display," Avery said. I watched it move, slow and deliberate, like someone was pulling it on a string. "Come on," I said. We crossed the lake on foot, boots crunching on snow-covered ice. The festival noise faded behind us. Out here, it was just wind and darkness, and that one floating light. When we got close, I saw what was holding it. A stick, shoved into the ice. The lantern hung from fishing line. "Someone planted this," Avery said. Noah's camcorder whirred. That's when I saw the glove. It was frozen into the ice, half buried, crusted with something dark, a disturbing stain, old and unsettling. "Goodness," I whispered. Avery knelt down, brushing snow away. "There's more." Boot prints, fresh, leading away from the lantern, toward the forest. "Who the heck walks out here alone?" Noah asked. "Nobody." That was the answer. Nobody smart. "We should tell the cops," I said. "The forest swallowed us whole." The boot prints were easy to follow. Whoever made them wasn't trying to hide. They led us off the lake, through a stand of frozen pines, onto a narrow trail I recognized. "This goes to Dog Creek Road," I said. Avery nodded. "My uncle's ranch is out this way." We walked for maybe 20 minutes. The snow got deeper. The wind picked up. Then Noah stopped. "What's that?" Ahead, through the trees. Another lantern glowed. We approached slowly. This one was tied to a fence post. Next to it, a piece of fabric, torn, stained, hung from the barbed wire. "That's from a young person's jacket," Avery said. Her voice went flat. I felt my stomach drop. Noah's camera shook as he filmed. "This is bait," I said. "Someone's marking a trail." "For what?" Noah whispered. We found out. 100 yards later, a clearing, a hunter's blind, half collapsed, and inside, scattered across the frozen ground, IDs, driver's licenses, old photos, a backpack. I recognized one of the licenses. Sarah Henderson, last year's disappearance. "Oh my God," Avery breathed. Noah filmed everything, hands trembling. I crouched down, picking through the items. There were more. Way more, going back years, decades maybe. "This is a trophy pile," I said. "Someone's been taking people." And then, we heard it. A crack, not ice, not branches, a footstep. We ran. I don't remember deciding to. One second we were frozen, the next we were crashing through the forest. Branches whipping our faces, lungs burning. Behind us, something moved. Big, fast. Split up, Avery yelled. Bad idea, but panic doesn't think. She veered left. Noah went right. I kept straight, legs pumping, vision blurred. I didn't see the wire until I hit it. Clotheslined. I went down hard, back slamming into frozen ground. Pain exploded across my throat. Through watering eyes, I saw a shape emerge from the trees, tall, broad, wearing a parka and a ski mask. He carried a lantern in one hand and a dangerous object in the other. I scrambled backward, clawing at the snow. He didn't rush, just walked, calm, like he'd done this 1,000 times. "You kids don't listen," he said, voice muffled, local accent, someone from town. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't work. He raised the object. A rock smashed into his head. Avery, she came out of nowhere, arm cocked back for another throw. "Run, Liam." I didn't need to be told twice. We crashed through the forest together. Avery dragging me by the jacket. Behind us, the man recovered, roaring. "Where's Noah?" I gasped. "I don't know." We burst onto Dog Creek Road, nearly got hit by a truck. Avery waved her arms frantically and it screeched to a halt. Old Man Chen. Thank God. "Call the police," Avery screamed. "Now!" They found Noah 2 hours later. He'd hidden in a drainage culvert, still clutching his camcorder. He'd filmed everything, the chase, the clearing, the man's face. When his mask slipped, it was Gerald Portman. Owned a hunting supply shop in town. Volunteer fire department, church every Sunday. He'd been taking people for 23 years. The police pulled evidence of 4 tragic fates from his property. Found traces of 11 more. Travelers, hitchhikers, foster kids. People nobody looked too hard for. He used the Festival of Lights as cover, the lanterns as bait, drew people out onto the ice, into the woods, where he'd set traps and snares, like animals. Constable Morrison came by the garage a week later, said we'd probably saved lives, said the case would have gone cold again without us. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt sick. They canceled the Festival of Lights that year. Maybe forever. Noah moved again, new foster home, different town. Sent me a message saying he was done with cameras. Avery and I still meet up sometimes. Don't talk much about that night. Don't need to. Every Christmas Eve now, I stay inside, lock the doors, ignore the pretty lights, because I learned something that night in the woods. Monsters don't look like monsters. They look like neighbors, shopkeepers, volunteers. They smile when you pass them on the street, and they wait, patient as winter, for you to follow the lights.
I was 7 years old when I decided I was going to catch Santa Claus. I remember sitting behind the couch in our living room, wrapped in my favorite blanket, heart already pounding with excitement, watching the Christmas tree lights blink red and green against the wall. My parents had gone to bed an hour earlier. The house was warm, safe, filled with that particular silence that only comes on Christmas Eve when snow is falling outside and everyone you love is asleep under the same roof. I had a plan. I'd wait until I heard the sleigh bells, see him put the presents under the tree, maybe even talk to him, prove to my older brother that Santa was real. I was so sure of myself. My throat was dry from the anticipation, but I stayed perfectly still, listening to the hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the house settling. I wasn't scared. Not yet. The first hour was easy. I counted the ornaments on the tree. I watched the snow through the window, thick and steady, turning our street into something from a storybook. The living room smelled like pine and my mom's ginger cookies. Everything felt exactly how Christmas Eve should feel. I remember thinking I was the luckiest person in the world, getting to witness something magical that other people only dreamed about. The clock on the mantel ticked softly. was almost midnight. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and waited, eyes fixed on the front door, then the fireplace, then back to the door. My parents had left a plate of cookies and a glass of milk on the coffee table. I stared at them, waiting for the moment they'd disappear, for the magic to start. Around 12:30, I heard it, a sound outside. Not sleigh bells, not exactly, more like something scraping against the side of the house. I held my breath, every muscle in my small body going rigid. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. Then, nothing. Silence again. I exhaled slowly, told myself it was just the wind moving a branch against the siding. We had that big oak tree in the front yard. That had to be it. I forced myself to relax, loosened my grip on the blanket. False alarm, just the wind. I settled back into my hiding spot, feeling foolish for getting so startled. Of course there would be sounds. Santa was coming. That's what I was waiting for. I took a deep breath, tried to slow my heartbeat. The house returned to its peaceful quiet. The tree lights continued their lazy blinking. Everything was fine. I must have let my guard down because I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear footsteps. What I heard was the subtle change in the air itself, the way the silence suddenly felt heavier, denser, like the house was holding its breath. The temperature dropped, not gradually, instantly. I watched my breath fog in front of my face, which made no sense because the heater was running. I could still hear it humming. The Christmas lights on the tree flickered once, twice, then held steady, but dimmer now, as if something was drawing power from them. That's when I realized something was in the room with me. I pressed myself flatter against the back of the couch, pulled the blanket up to my nose, and forced myself not to move, not to breathe too loudly. My hands started trembling. I told myself it was Santa. It had to be Santa. I'd waited all night for this, but my body knew better. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. I could hear it moving, not walking exactly. The sound was wrong. Too smooth, too deliberate, like something dragging itself across the hardwood floor with slow, measured intention. I wanted to look, needed to see, but I was paralyzed with a fear I'd never experienced before. A fear that lived in my bones and made my muscles lock up completely. The sound stopped near the Christmas tree. I heard the branches rustle softly, ornaments tinkling against each other. Then silence again. A long, suffocating silence that made my ears ring. I was holding my breath without meaning to. My lungs starting to burn, but I was terrified that if I exhaled, if I made even the smallest sound, it would know I was there. Through the tiny gap between the couch and the wall, I could see a sliver of the living room. A shadow moved across my limited field of vision. Not a normal shadow. This one seemed to exist independently of any light source, darker than the darkness around it, moving in a way that made my eyes hurt to follow. It was tall, too tall for the room. Or maybe it was bent at angles that didn't make sense. I couldn't tell. My 7-year-old brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The thing moved toward the coffee table. I heard the plate scrape against the wood surface. Then the sound of something, not eating, not drinking, but consuming the cookies in a way that made my stomach turn. Wet sounds, wrong sounds, sounds that didn't match any animal or person I'd ever heard. I bit down on the blanket to keep from whimpering. My whole body was shaking now, violent tremors I couldn't control. I pressed my eyes shut, hoping it would leave, hoping I'd wake up and this would be a nightmare, hoping to anyone or anything that would listen. But when I opened my eyes again, it was still there, and it had moved closer. I could see part of it now through my tiny viewing gap. What I thought was a limb, or an appendage, or something that served that purpose. The proportions were wrong. The joints bent in places they shouldn't. The surface, whatever it was, seemed to shift and ripple like liquid in the dim light from the tree. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I was 7 years old, frozen behind a couch, barely breathing. watching something impossible examine my living room with what felt like curiosity and intelligence. It stopped in front of the tree. I watched its shadow stretch across the wall, elongating into shapes that made my head hurt. It reached toward the presence, lifted one, turned it over with movements that were too fluid, too graceful, mechanical and organic at the same time. Then it set the present down and went still, completely, utterly still. And that's when I realized it was listening the same way I was listening. The heater hummed, the clock ticked. Snow whispered against the windows, but underneath those sounds, I could feel the quality of the silence change. It knew someone was awake in the house. It knew someone was watching. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it would burst from my chest. Surely it could hear that. Surely that thunderous pounding would give me away. I clenched my teeth, squeezed my eyes shut again, and tried to make myself invisible, tried to disappear into the couch, into the wall, into nothing. I don't know how long it stayed there. Time had stopped meaning anything. It felt like hours. It was probably minutes. But eventually, I heard it move again. That same wrong sliding sound, heading away from me now, toward the front of the house. I heard something that might have been the door opening, or might have been something else entirely. Then the temperature shifted back to normal so suddenly that I gasped. Sucking in air like I'd been underwater, the Christmas tree lights brightened to their normal glow. The house settled back into its familiar warmth. I stayed behind that couch, trembling uncontrollably, until the gray light of dawn started filtering through the windows. My legs had gone numb. My face was wet with tears I didn't remember crying. When I finally found the courage to stand, my muscles barely worked. I looked at the living room in the early morning light. Everything appeared normal. The presents were there. The tree stood in its usual spot. The plate on the coffee table was empty, crumbs scattered across it, the milk glass drained. But something was wrong with the presents. They were stacked differently than before. Not the way my mother arranged them, not the way anyone would arrange them. They were organized by size, perfectly aligned, with mathematical precision that no human would bother with at midnight on Christmas Eve. And in the thin layer of melted snow near the front door, snow that shouldn't have been there, snow that couldn't have been there because the door had been closed all night, I saw marks. Not footprints, not exactly. More like something had been dragged across the wet floor, leaving trails that didn't match any pattern I knew. I stood there in my rumpled pajamas, blanket still clutched in my shaking hands, staring at those marks, and something inside me understood that I would never tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? What would I even say? I'm 30 now. 23 years have passed since that Christmas Eve, and I still can't spend the night alone in a quiet house during the holidays. People think I'm strange for it, for the way I tense up when someone mentions Christmas traditions, for how I always make sure I'm either at someone else's house or have friends staying over between Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. I've tried to rationalize it over the years, tried to convince myself it was a dream, a young imagination, sleep paralysis, anything that would make sense. But my body won't let me forget. Even now, sitting here in my apartment with the heat on and all the lights blazing, I can feel that same cold terror creeping up my spine when I think about it. My hands start trembling. My throat goes dry. My heartbeat picks up that same frantic rhythm it had when I was 7 years old, hiding behind my parents' couch, watching something that shouldn't exist examine my living room with inhuman curiosity. The worst part isn't what I saw. The worst part is that I've been back to that house. My parents still live there. I've spent dozens of Christmases there since, always surrounded by family, always with noise and movement and life to drown out the memories. But last year, I arrived early, before anyone else. It was Christmas Eve afternoon. The sun was still up, completely safe. But when I walked into that living room, when I saw the Christmas tree in almost the exact same spot, something made me look behind the couch. There was nothing there. Of course there was nothing there. But in the dust on the hardwood floor, barely visible, unless you knew to look for it. I saw scratches. Long, thin scratches that shouldn't exist in that pattern. They could have been from furniture being moved. They could have been from anything. But they weren't. I know they weren't. And as I stood there, staring at those marks, I felt the temperature drop just slightly. Just enough to make my breath catch. Just enough to remind me that some things don't need to be explained to be understood. I don't celebrate Christmas anymore. Not really. I go through the motions for family, for appearances. But I never stay up past midnight on Christmas Eve. I never watch the darkness the way I used to. And sometimes, in the dead of winter, when the house is quiet and the snow is falling outside, I wake up at 3 in the morning with that same feeling I had when I was 7, the certainty that something is in the room with me, standing perfectly still, listening to me breathe, remembering the young person who saw it and lived to carry the memory. I turn on every light. I check every corner. There's never anything there. But my hands shake for an hour afterward, and my heart won't slow down, and some part of me knows, will always know, that whatever visited my house that Christmas Eve is still out there, still moving through the world in ways we don't understand, still arriving in silent houses while young minds wait for magic and find something else entirely.